My patrons ask me questions and I answer them here. Let's get to it. Everyone, this is Nikachu, Merfolk Master, and it is time for the Patreon Ask Me Anything for May 2018, where my patrons ask me questions and I just answer them. So let's start with Rebecca Claire. She asks, where did the name Nikachu come from? So, way back in my Pokemon trading card game days when I was like 11, 12, 13-ish years old, I used my creativity to design my own Pokemon card. And it was basically this glowing Pikachu, radioactive Pikachu, and I called it Nikachu. Now, I carried this card around me all the time playing in Pokemon trading card game tournaments. That's not important. One day, I get exposed to the internet, or I should say I have my own personal computer and I now have to figure out a username that I'm going to use online. And my 13-year-old self already decided I'm going to be a troll online. This is hilarious. I love trolling people and I need a username that's going to stick, something sharp, something that people can remember. And looking beyond all my stuff that I made in my childhood, Nikachu really stood out. I'm going to be Nikachu, and it has stuck ever since. Thank you for asking. Eddie Summercorn asks, do Canadians use the word soda or pop when referring to soft drinks? So, I want to say sort of yes. I mean, we mostly use cola. We just call it what it is, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, but in my opinion, I hear it every so often. Do you want a soda? Do you want pop? It doesn't happen very often, I would say. My brother, on the other hand, says hard no, we don't use this word. I don't think it is that hard. I do hear it from time to time, but I don't know really how often. I don't really think about it at this point when people, 'cause I guess if someone asked me for pop or something like that, I would just assume that they have Pepsi or cola. Thanks for asking. So next, Jonathan Jones asks, what would it take to join the Nikachu network? The Riverwork? Tidal Stream? Ocean Current? Are you only looking for pro players or people who can consistently put out content? Asking for a friend. So one thing's for sure, I do want more archetypes on this channel. They are pretty well received. I am looking, however, for people that can give value to other players. So you don't need to be the best person in the world, but at the very least, you have to be one of the best people already putting out content. If you're a Jund player, you better be competing with all the pros that are playing Jund, because there is quite a bit of that stuff out there. You do need results. Like, you need to be able to teach people. At the very least, you need to be able to give value to other players in some form of another. I do want this to be about, you know, trying to learn your archetype and being able to teach techniques and strategy of that archetype to people who want to learn it and can get something out of that sort of content. Consistency, yeah, you gotta have content. You have to be able to churn out content on some consistent basis. You can't like put like one piece of content out and then, you know, nothing for the next 5 months or whatever. YouTube at least is an outlet, a medium of consistency, and there has to be some consistency to that. So yeah, you don't necessarily need to be a pro player. I mean, I wasn't even a pro player for the majority of me having this channel, and it was still very valuable to other people. But yeah, that's sort of what I'm looking. But I guess in essence, I'm looking for people who are dedicated to their deck. They're unmovable from this archetype, because the thing that Star City Games and Channel Fireball don't get is that when people buy into Modern or Legacy, they're stuck to those decks, at least for a year. And so when there comes 1 month, everyone says, Dredge is the best deck in the format, you have to play Dredge, this is how you play Dredge, and you buy into Dredge, and then all of a sudden, they say, No, now it's Titan Shift. Now you gotta play Titan Shift. Well, what about the Dredge player? Now how do you play Dredge in the environment that just changed in 1 month? Now what's the sideboard guide? How do we adjust the deck? How do we adjust the sideboard? What are you gonna do for that Dredge player? They don't get that people are stuck to their deck. They can't move from one archetype to another archetype so quickly. When they buy into one archetype, they're going to be stuck to it for a very large chunk of time before they move to something else. So that's why a channel like mine is very valuable, because no matter thick or thin what's happening in the modern metagame, I'm showing you how to win with that archetype if that is the archetype that you have decided to go with. So that would also be that also is something mandatory for the people that want to teach their archetype on this channel, because you can't be teaching this archetype for like 6 months and then, oh well, this isn't as good as I wanted it to be, so I'm going to choose something else. No, well, what are you going to do about, we are accommodating all those people who have been invested in their archetype, and they want to learn how to adjust and adapt and compete in the metagame, no matter what that metagame looks like going on into the future. I mean, unless the thing is rendered unplayable, like some key part has been completely banned and the deck just can't function at all anymore. So, but thank you very much for the question. Next, Jeremy Fabre. What are your thoughts on Magic the Gathering Online, and do you plan on doing more videos on it? They probably won't do any modern, but the Merfolk deck is pretty strong right now. I'd love to see how you draft on it. So I'm not much of a drafter, so I'm going to leave that to the draft people. It's just not my cup of tea when it comes to Magic. Merfolk, however, is a pretty competitive deck, and I do plan on having more Magic the Gathering Online, Magic the Gathering Arena content for this channel. I was approved for sponsorship. I'm just waiting on a background check that Wizards is doing on me, and then I hope to get nice rewards and start streaming Magic the Gathering Arena. I think Magic the Gathering Arena is amazing. Like, this thing is pretty close to perfect. It's so fast. The graphics are great. It's going to push Magic in a direction that has never been seen before. There are a lot of barriers to Magic, especially financially, that keep a lot of demographics out of Magic the Gathering in the first place. That's going to be obliterated with Magic the Gathering Arena. Anyone can enter this game for free. This is going to be the first time you can play Magic the Gathering for free, not on some stupid garbage client like Cockatrice that can't enforce the rules at all. Not that to say that those things are, you know, obsolete or anything like that. They're fine, but an official client that invites players into Magic the Gathering, and then you can graduate yourself from there. I mean, you're still gonna have to pay money to play top tier decks, but the entry point will be completely free. You don't have to invest any money to know what this game is like, what it's like, how to play. And I can't wait until we have Grand Prix style tournaments on something like this. I don't know if they have anything like that in the pipeline, but at some point they might have, like, you know, tournaments that you can enter with like 1,000 people. I would love to play a Grand Prix from home, something that Magic the Gathering Online just can't do and isn't popular enough to do. What else? And in those tournaments, we can have probably really good prizes for competitive players. The thing about prizing in Grand Prix is, first off, it's very expensive to go to a Grand Prix, so the cost of just going to a Grand Prix is very high. The cost to run the tournament is very high. The convention center is not free. Paying the judges is not free, and all the people that take to get the whole tournament organized, it costs money. It costs a lot of money just to have coverage. It's very expensive. No one looks at the costs of these things, but it is quite expensive. None of that all gets obliterated if you can hold a giant tournament online. So there should be more incentive to have larger prizes for something that could happen online. And also, you can never really have really big prizes on paper, because I think if somehow you made the prize large enough, then just a ton of cheaters would show up, whereas the rules will be enforced fairly on the internet. So, I mean, those are things like I'm hoping for super far down the line for Magic the Gathering Arena, but I know that because Arena exists, that, you know, we can move in that direction at some point. And not to mention, like, you know, everything is incredibly fluid. You can say whatever you want about the economy, that's fixable, that's all adjustable. The fact of the matter is they have now a very user-friendly client, very clean and easy to use. The sounds are very engaging. It is a pretty, I don't know if it's really that better than Hearthstone, but it is a great competitor. It's certainly a huge upgrade to Magic the Gathering Online. I understand that, you know, it may not be as rigid as Magic the Gathering Online, or how do I want to put it? Like, on Magic the Gathering Online, you can step-by-step play as accurately as paper Magic. It's too close, though, in my opinion, to paper Magic. I don't want a helicopter simulation of paper Magic. I want to be able to play Magic that is basically as it would be spiritually. You know, I'm willing to give up things like the damage step, being able to interact at the damage step to make the game move faster, flow better, and so on. So anyway, those are my thoughts on Magic the Gathering Arena. I'm hoping that they get modern eventually. I know it's not happening soon. It may not happen for like 3 years. They have better things to do. They have to make the client better. They have to keep, you know, they on a regular basis have to keep adding standard sets. So while they do that, they may not have time to go back in time and add all the modern sets. But I love it, and I know it's going to be the future of Magic the Gathering. I'm hoping it's going to create a huge boom for Magic. You know, again, with that financial thing, kids can play now. All right? When I got into Magic at the age of 13 because it wasn't too expensive. This game is too expensive for kids. It's just impossible to start playing Magic for free, or like, yeah, it's basically that. It's very, very hard financially. So that's what we got Magic the Gathering Arena for. So next, we've got Edward S. Where do I find the Burn Sideboard Guide? That's a good question. Where is it, Andrew Day 2 Dryden? Where is that Burn Sideboard Guide? Where are the paper matches at? That's something, okay, that's, I was hoping that we could use like Fusion Gaming's streaming thing, but do you know what? Like, they have a pretty good streaming setup, but it doesn't look like they're streaming on the regular on like Thursday nights. My local game store streams on Thursday nights, and I was hoping to sneak in some matches with Andrew Day 2 Dryden there. Other than that, I guess we're just gonna whip out my cell phone and then record the paper matches. But you know, they're coming. They're coming. The real Ask Me Anything is, though, when you look at the main deck versus sideboard versus unplayable and maybe board, how do you decide what makes the cut? For example, Deprive was not in 2017 lists, but it is in the main deck or sideboard now. Spell Pierce is back in the main deck. So, like, Deprive looked unplayable for a very long time. I guess this was just a card we slept on for forever. I played with it back last summer, and then just got obliterated by blue-white control because I didn't have Cavern of Souls in my deck. And I didn't go that deep in the playtesting, but blue-white control was too popular to not play Cavern of Souls, and I figured that, well, I can't play with Deprive and Cavern of Souls at the same time, so I just scrapped it. But fortunately, more playtesting came in the form of M. Hayashi, who just rattled off 5-0 after 5-0 after 5-0 with Deprive, and proved, you know what, with 15 blue sources, this is incredibly good, and really fixed a lot of holes that Merfolk had in the past. And with that, now it's become core of the deck. It just took enough playtesting by the community to realize, hey, Deprive is a very real card. And in my opinion, now it's worth not having Cavern of Souls. Like, even if another, I don't know, even I might have maybe a Cavern of Souls in my sideboard if I really, really, really needed it, but Deprive is just too good to pass up. The returning a land to my hand has not been detrimental at all compared to how it can counter anything. Just counters anything that I want it to counter. But when it comes to like something like Spell Pierce, so yeah, like Deprive, it was a special case where we didn't know if that was going to be good, and it just ended up, and with, you know, the proper playtesting, it was just a surprise good card that was sitting in Gatherer for who knows how long, and became, you know, was discovered to be playable. So that is a special exception. When it comes to something like Spell Pierce, you look at the threats in the metagame and you ask, can you counter these things? So over time, I just get an idea, okay, Ceremonious Rejection, good against Affinity, good against Tron, good against Eldrazi Tron. So when more of those decks pop up, that's when I want to lean on a card like that, when I want to put it in the sideboard. But when a card like Spell Pierce, I know good against sorceries, good against planeswalkers, good against enchantments. Are there any of those problematic things in the metagame? And if the answer is yes, then I want to lean on a card more like that. And I feel like Spell Pierce is pretty well positioned right now. It counters... it counters enchantments, planeswalkers, and sorceries that I can't deal with. Whether it goes in the main deck or the sideboard just depends on how frequently I'm going to face decks where I need it. So is Tron very popular? Is Titan Shift very popular? Is Blue Moon very popular? Those decks those decks hate Spell Pierce. They don't want to see Spell Pierce. Is Anger of the Gods in the main deck of decks popular? Like I want Spell Pierce against those things. So yeah, I have Spell Pierce in the main deck. One thing though, I have Spell Pierce in the main deck almost as a replacement for Curse Catcher. Curse Catcher is not really countering the things that I want it to counter, whereas Spell Pierce does. Spell Pierce can counter more effectively instants and sorceries. They have to pay more mana. I can counter Jace the Mind Sculptor, search for his Canta. I can counter Anger of the Gods out of Blue Moon and Titan Shift. Yeah, but overall, you lean on the cards when they become more positioned, and the decision to become part of the sideboard and the main deck just depends on frequency of those decks. If I'm seeing a lot of Archetype, let's talk about Tidebinder Mage. Tidebinder Mage could be in the main deck if there are a lot of decks that are weak to Tidebinder Mage. Is Elves very popular? Is Burn very popular? Is Jund very popular? Is Infect really popular? Is 8-Whack very popular? If there's a huge wide ratio of those decks, then you want to have Tidebinder Mage in your main deck versus the sideboard. Whereas if those decks are players in the metagame but aren't the majority, then you have to put those cards in the sideboard. Maybe the big takeaway is, if there are cards in your sideboard that you would be bringing in super often, like more than 50%, then probably that card deserved to be in your main deck. With the exception that some cards are only good in games 2 and 3, but are not good in game 1. For example, there are a lot of counter spells I might bring in games 2 and 3 because they're going to counter a lot of instants and sorceries, or a lot of threats that didn't exist in game 1, but they are going to exist in game 2 and 3. Maybe like Grixis Death Shadow. You know, counter spells not super important in game 1 because they're very removal light. They don't have a lot of removal in game 1. They just have like a lot of filtering and card draw and ways of losing life, and then put a Death Shadow in play. Not a lot of ways of dealing with threats, very, very few. But post-board they do. They bring in tons of removal post-board. So that's when we want to have the Kira Great Glass Spinners. That's when we want to bring in the counter spells. So, you know, it's a tricky thing. But I hope I sort of answered your question, and maybe at least you learned something from all that. So thank you very much, everyone, for your questions. It was a great Ask Me Anything for May 2018. This has been Nikachu answering my Patreon questions.